Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art and culture, and this is Billboard Breakdown. Well, you know I'd like to say that I called it, but let me be honest here, I didn't call all of it. And really, if you'd seen any of the sales data or the streams and simply just checked YouTube, you could have predicted this too. What caught me a bit off guard wasn't just that we had a new number one, but we got a new number two right behind it. A 1-2 punch that we haven't seen thus far this entire year that I've covered it on Billboard Breakdown. So enough dancing around it, let's get straight to our top 10. As expected, Adele smashed into her number one debut with Hello. 4 years after the mega-selling album 21 broke the back of the club boom, signaling the return of R&B and soul to the mainstream, and crushed pretty much everything else in its path. I'll talk a little bit more about the song itself later, but as I said, it's no surprise it went to the very top. Breaking records in digital sales, dominating streaming and YouTube, and roaring up the radio, it was a lock on the number one. What caught me a bit off guard was Sorry by Justin Bieber going up to number two, falling right behind Adele on streaming sales and YouTube with solid airplay growth. Again, we'll talk about the song more in a little bit, but right now I'm just astounded that Justin Bieber's still got a strong enough fan base to support a single with this much surging power that it could have easily taken number one if Adele wasn't here. So now we gotta focus on the big loser from all this, Hotline Bling by Drake, forced back down to number three. Now I talked about this last week, how it blew its chance for number one, and it's sealed here. Even despite its strong sales, still gaining on airplay and finally picking up a bit of YouTube, too little, too late. Granted, everyone's been forced back a bit now. The Hills by The Weeknd tumbles off the top to number four, but that might have happened anyway as airplay, sales, and YouTube all dropped hard. Then there's What Do You Mean by Justin Bieber falling down to number five, which had a similar pattern of drops, a little bit more stability on YouTube and airplay, compensating for some weaker streaming. Following that, we had Stitches by Shawn Mendes slipping down to number six. That's not because the song was actually weakening. It had a good week on airplay and sales and held steady on streaming, but just doesn't have the same swell to get any higher. Similar case for Wild Streams by Taylor Swift. It might have peaked on airplay, sure, but it actually got a boost on YouTube and the sales weren't bad, just not enough. 679 by Fetty Wap and Remy Voice falls into a similar category, falling down to number 8, with airplay gains compensating for some weaker sales, but just not enough to keep it any higher. What actually held reasonably steady to my surprise was Locked Away by Rock City featuring Adam Levine. Yeah, airplay and sales were kind of weak, but it actually surged on YouTube to only slip down to number 9, which is not as big of a loss as I was expecting. And finally, we have the expected drop for Can't Feel My Face by The Weeknd falling to number 10. It lost across the board, it'll be out of the top 10 probably next week, it's only a matter of time. And speaking of expected losses, let's talk about our losers and dropouts. A lot of them this week, and while I'm kind of annoyed to see Lose My Mind by Brett Eldridge drop out and a little disappointed, it did have its 20 weeks, it's fair here. Same with John Cougar, John Deere, John 316 by Keith Urban. Respectable run, no surprise it's gone. But considering along with them, they took out Flex Ooh 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 by Rich Homie Quan, Worth It by Fifth Harmony and Kid Ink, and This Could Be Us by Ray Shrimmer. I'm definitely not complaining, that's a positive margin in my books. And hell, I'm not even complaining about most of the losses either, especially with Drake's bad week continuing with 100 by The Game falls down to 100, and Digital Dash and Scholarships with Future fall down to 90 and 95 respectively. Outside of that, we had a lot of losses, but they're a bit of a mixed bag. No complaints about losing Love Myself by Haley Steinfeld down to 48, a little bit earlier than I would expect. But then we got Losing Levels by Nick Jonas falling early to 60. I thought that was a good pop song. I thought it had some swell here. Gonna Want It Tonight by Chase Rice falling early to 88. Okay, I'm fine with that. But Powerful by Major Lazer featuring Ellie Goulding and Terrace Riley slipping down to 96 as the momentum seemed to evaporate. And yeah, Cool for the Summer by Demi Lovato slipped down to 57. But that's nearing 20 weeks. It got enough points to land on the year-end list. I'm happy there. And finally, Perfect by One Direction slips down to 29, but that's to be expected after a debut week like it had. If One Direction debuts high, they're not gonna stay high. Where things with One Direction get a little bit more interesting is when it comes to our gains. Most notably the gains for Home rising up to 74. I did not expect that. It along with the gains to Say It by Tory Lanez up to 72, and Roses by Chainsmokers featuring Roses rising up to 71 encompass our gains from our new arrivals. And while they're a little bit bigger than I expected, they're not exactly surprising. Nor is Lay It All On Me by Rudimental featuring Ed Sheeran rising even more to 62. It's got momentum, expected to keep gaining. Next we have Don't by Bryson Tiller continuing to ride out its success from his debut album. More on this in a little bit, as it went up to 54. And finally, we had Jay McCramer's I Got the Boy going up to 81. Looks like country radio finally saw if you keep pitching songs out, you gotta replace them with something, and at least that song's actually pretty good for once. Although, if we take a look at the rest of the oncoming entries, well, we'll get to it. But to switch gears entirely, let's talk about our solitary returning entry, where good is a lot more qualified.
Bust a couple moves, hey, see how well you move, hey, I teach you how to jug with me. I teach you how to jug with me. I teach you how to jug, baby. I teach you how to jug with me.
It was one of the weakest songs from Fetty Wap's self-titled debut, mostly because it feels like one of the most clumsy. Fetty Wap's chorus melody is lower and nowhere near as flattering, especially against those keys that just feel off rhythm with the hi-hats, and the lyrics are following in the Migos tradition of trying to define a lyrical idea with this jug that has less meaning the more you think about it. And Monty's elongated syllables on his verse are annoying enough without the fake horns trying to support them. Overall, if Fetty Wap's personality can redeem the cheap production and the basic lyrics at his best songs, this is highlighting what can happen at the worst, and it's remarkably easy for me to tune this song out because it's really kind of mediocre. So yeah, that was pretty quick. Now on to our new arrivals, starting with number 98, Exchange by Bryson Tiller.
Just give me all of you in exchange for me, break it down. Yes, sir. Check.
So when I covered Don't by Bryson Tiller before, I wasn't all that impressed by it. I mean, I understood the appeal if you want an artist midway between Chris Brown, The Weeknd, and Drake with the vocal cadence that kind of reminded me a bit of R. Kelly. He could deliver that, but I already had artists in those veins, and Bryson Tiller didn't really stand out to me or interest me all that much. And really, I can say much of the same thing about Exchange as a song. On the plus side, he got rid of the gratuitous pitch shifting and the vocal sample against the minimalist bass-heavy beat. That's fine enough. And while I'm not exactly wowed by Tiller's personality, the lyrics, they seemed fine enough, with him getting some feelings for an ex and he wants to try again. Okay, I can go with that. He can accept that he wants to change his ways. I'm behind this. Until the final verse where he says explicitly that he's gonna screw her over in very literal terms. So, okay ladies, for a guy who said that he was never loyal to begin with the first time, why would you want this guy back? Why would you buy into this? Because I'm not buying this sentiment for a second here. And all the more sign that I made the right choice ignoring this guy's debut album, because this song, it kinda sucks. Next, number 97, I Love This Life by LoCash.
Country girl, I love a Friday night. Man, I love this life. Sound of an old dirt road rolling through my mind. Man, I love this life.
Okay, just to provide you some context, folks, you're not listening to Florida Georgia Line, but I can see how you get that confused given the overly synthetic bro country feel of it, and the fact that none of the duos that major labels have pushed have gotten any traction at all or have sounded much beyond Florida Georgia Line. Now, if you're reading liner notes, you might recognize this duo as being responsible for Tim McGraw's abysmal Truck Yeah. Seriously, that was the name of the song. But they've been putting in hard work in the indie scene for the past decade before finally getting some traction with their first major label single, and wow, this blows. Might as well start with the fact that the spacey effects do nothing against that painfully fake drum machine, and even less with the banjo, even if there's a decent melody behind it. But the larger problem is that the song has no personality whatsoever. Lyrically, it's a stream of country cliches, which I can barely focus on in comparison with how painfully that electric guitar is just compressed. Look, I'm not gonna begrudge LoCash for finally breaking into the mainstream. Good for them, they put in the work. But do they have to do it with this? Ugh, no. Number 93, Dibs by Kelsea Ballerini.
So baby, I'll take whatever it is you got to give. Yeah, I'm calling dibs on your lips, on your kiss, on your time. Boy, I'm calling dibs on your hand, on your heart.
So if you follow pop country at all, you notice that there's been a push to find that next big female star, that Taylor Swift analog. And while I'd take Lucy Hale or even Maddie and Tay, the biggest push has actually been from the indie scene with Kelsea Ballerini. And yet you wouldn't know she's coming from the indie scene with that sound because her material is some of the most processed and synthetic pop country that you'll hear on mainstream radio. The funny thing is when I reviewed her debut album the first time, I actually did find some songs with potential, like the title track or Peter Pan or Secondhand Smoke. This, on the other hand, well, honestly, it's just pretty inoffensive. It's a lightweight love song anchored in acoustic guitar and banjo off a beat that's sparse enough to be ignored until actual drums come in on the chorus. Hell, the worst part is that guitar tone on the solo has absolutely nothing to it. It's pretty weedy and weak. But the larger problem comes in the song doesn't really do much more than her previous single, Love Me Like You Mean It, that it already did, especially from a compositional point of view. Again, the song is tolerable, but when she had songs with decent or better quality, it's disappointing to see this as the next single. Just saying. Number 84, Used to Love You by Gwen Stefani.
I remember for the first time since I hated you. that I used to love you. And I don't know why I cry, but I think it's 'cause I remember for the first time since I hated you, and that I used to love you.
You know, I'll say it, I don't know whether to feel sorry for her or just feel kind of disappointed in Gwen Stefani, because her track record really is all over the place at this point. So like with her band No Doubt, when they were actually halfway decent in the 90s before they really sold out. Then Gwen tried to reinvent herself as a pop star throughout the early to mid 2000s, and while I hated Holla Back Girl, easily one of the most annoying songs of the past decade, I actually thought The Sweet Escape with Akon was kind of charming, even though the production has not aged well at all. But ever since that song, her buzz evaporated, and between No Doubt and solo singles, she's been trying to get traction with really no results. Hell, she even got a role as a coach on The Voice and is apparently striking a relationship with Blake Shelton coming off of her divorce with Gavin Rossdale and his divorce from Miranda Lambert, which is just way too much drama for me, and it still hasn't given her a lot of swell for new singles. The point is that she's got a new song inspired by her divorce, and wow, I wish this was a lot better. I mean, points for J.R. Rodham for actually giving her a pretty gleaming synth to work with, even if the buzzier beat isn't the best counterpart for it, and Gwen remains a pretty decent songwriter for all the acrid bitterness and complicated emotions that comes with the break of a marriage that lasted over a decade. But wow, Gwen does not sound good on this song. She's still expressive, and I get that she's supposed to sound like she's crying, but when her voice breaks and goes flat on the end of the chorus, it sounds really rough and not in a good way. Hate to say it, but Gwen made some great slinky, vaudeville-esque pop music, and this sort of material demands either vocal poise or a rawness that she doesn't really have. Overall, I don't hate this. It's a decent song, but Gwen, this is not the lane you should be in. You can do better than this. Number 82, Used to Love You Sober by Kane Brown.
Drowned and drunk in love. I used to think you'd never say it's over. I used to love you sober. I used to love you sober.
Oh, I've been wanting to talk about this guy for a while, who because of his viral success has branded himself the country Justin Bieber. Yeah, we'll get to Bieber himself in a few minutes, but I was suspicious of this guy's push for a while now. Mostly now his EP started picking up sales after about a couple months after it got released, especially considering that while he has a YouTube channel, this song doesn't have a full video, and that kind of surprised me considering it's his biggest hit as of now. Either way, Trigger over at the excellent site Saving Country Music has done an incredibly detailed dissection of why this guy's getting traction, all the marketing behind it. But let's talk about this guy himself, reportedly inspired by Sam Hunt and Cole Swindle. Yeah, seriously. But let me start by saying there are a few things to like here. The 6-note guitar line, that's decent, the piano's pretty potent, and the roughness of Brown's lower vocals, it sounds fine. Hell, even the lyrics aren't bad. Getting over a girl with a bottle aren't anything new, sure, and Painted Blue by Sunday Best is far more heartbreaking in this vein, but the lyrics are fine here, I can accept them. The problem is the production, especially with the chorus and the percussion. It just feels painfully synthetic. It doesn't complement any of the deeper tones that really cry out for some steel guitar. And then there's Brown's mid to upper range, and look, it's not bad, but it doesn't really feel nearly as raw or organic as his lower range of his vocals. As a whole, the song's actually okay, a little better than I expected, but it's nothing great or even all that good. Although, I can say this, you can expect to see a lot more Kane Brown coming, just warning you. Number 68, Emperor's New Clothes by Panic at the Disco.
She wants money ticket. Oh yeah, the crowd so close I can taste it. She wants money ticket. Oh yeah.
You know it's a really bad thing when your band has been hemorrhaging members and yet you're still gonna put an album just as a solo artist. But that's exactly what Brendan Urie is doing with his upcoming album Death of a Bachelor this January. And I've had a bad feeling about this since I heard Hallelujah over 6 months ago and thought that was an overblown mess. Either way, is this the newest single? Did it restore any hope for me? Honestly, yes and no. I do like the overblown horror vaudeville theatricality, which is a much stronger fit for this guy than any stabs at gospel, and the horns against the cacophonous percussion is pretty potent against the low sizzle of the guitar when you can hear it. Shame that so much of it lacks a deeper foundation and Urie's forcing his vocals into some shrieks that really can't be excused. They don't sound that good. But more importantly, I can't but feel like Panic at the Disco already did this a decade ago with a fever you can't sweat out, with better writing, better production, and better melodies. Again, I'm a sucker for this sort of aesthetic, and I get why Urie's going back to this well, but I'm not nearly as excited by this as I want to be because I've heard this before. Still, considering this week, Pretty good song though, I'll take it. Number 2, Sorry by Justin Bieber. So has anybody noticed that with every legitimate hit that Justin Bieber releases, he loses more and more of his personality? I mean, it's not like What Do You Mean is a bad song. It's pleasant, it's got a decent melodic groove, but it becomes background music for me very quickly, and I've got no shortage of better tropical house electronica that I'd listen to over this. In any case, this is his second single, and it would have been number 1 if it hadn't been for Adele. Honestly, this isn't bad. The fake horns actually blend pretty well against the textured percussion and the deeper mix to give the track some real swell behind it, especially off that warbling vocal sample. It sounds pretty good. 2 main problems though. Justin Bieber is easily the least interesting presence on his own song, and the second, the lyrics really run up the line of questionable. If he wanted to play the song as a straightforward apology, I'd be fine with that, but then he throws in little lines about how she gets angry at his honesty, and how there's really that nobody's innocent in this game for 2. It really looks like he's trying to deflect or lessen his own blame, and that really undercuts the emotional sentiment behind this song. But look, at the end of the day, both the singles from Bieber's new album has made it clear that it might not be a bad listen, but it'll certainly be a pretty bland one, and he still hasn't made a better song than Maria back from Believe 3 years ago, which is really the best thing he's ever done. As it is, okay, I guess I'll take it, but again, I've heard better. And finally, number 1, Hello by Adele.
At least I can say that I've tried to tell you I'm sorry for breaking your heart, but it don't matter. It clearly doesn't tear you apart anymore.
And now the big one, the easy best of the week, and the lead-off single that so many people desperately wanted to hear and hear me talk about. And really, when you look back upon the road that Adele blazed in modern music, especially in the past 5 years, reverb heavy, huge vocals on the R&B soul vein that pushed into painfully raw territory, it's hard to not look at Hello in a larger context, especially considering some of her earlier singles. And look, I loved Rolling in the Deep, and especially Someone Like You. They're some of my favorite hits of 2011, bar none, and I don't think Hello is quite better than either of them. Yes, I like it more than Rumor Has It and Skyfall, but for me it's on par with Turnin' Tables or Set Fire to the Rain. Damn good songs, but not quite a game changer. And believe me, it's not because of Adele herself and her delivery or her lyrics. In fact, the lyricism focusing on the complicated situation of calling an old ex to apologize and quiet some of her own internal demons, it's really quite excellent writing here, and I love how she positions herself as from the other side. It's a great metaphor when it comes to old ghosts coming back into somebody else's life. What bugs me here a bit is the production. Not that it's bad, it's definitely not, but that it doesn't do anything all that special or different than I haven't heard from reverb-soaked piano ballads produced by Greg Kurstin. I've heard a lot of these. I guess there's a slight hint of a little bit more warmth in comparison with the chilly hollowness of someone like Licky Lee, and those bells that come in on the final chorus add just enough of a gothic touch to really kick ass. I want to hear more of them, but I think I was expecting a little bit more in the instrumental presentation and production. It doesn't really stand out quite enough. Still, excellent song, but I think could have hit just a little bit harder. Just saying. So yeah, that was this week, and as I said, Adele runs away with Best of the Week. Honorable mention though, a little bit trickier. Even though I'm not entirely on board with it, I guess I'll give it to Emperor's New Clothes by Panic at the Disco with some cautious optimism. I'm hoping the album's good. As for the worst, honestly, nothing really stands out as atrocious, but you know what? I'm gonna give it to Bryson Tiller's Exchange for disingenuous dickishness. It really got under my skin. And just all I'll mention, I'm giving it to that LoCash song for just annoying the hell out of me. It should have been better. Overall, the arrival of Adele heralded a change in the winds to the Hot 100 the last time it came around. Let's see if that continues. Until then, I'm Mark. You're watching Billboard Breakdown on Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.